Welcome to Powerless Penguins United Big Book Main Share. This week, I'm pleased to introduce Mags D, who has kindly agreed to come and share with us. Mags, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your service, and to everybody in the background co-hosting, the readers. It's great to be with you all this morning, and happy Saturday. Here we are again. It's great to see everybody. If you haven't got your big book in front of you, then go get it, because it will be helpful, I would imagine, to go through it together. And if you haven't got a big book, I know that the Penguins will help sort you out with that. So my name is Mags. I'm an alcoholic. Drugs are part of my story, for sure. And it's an honour and privilege to be of service to the group. So I think we'll just get stuck in. We start, it always surprises me when you hand over to me. It's like, oh gosh, we're getting started already. Anyway, here we are. May as well get into it. So we are on page 20. I was just thinking last night, just in case, I hope somebody is keeping a little marker, because I would hate to think that I would miss a little paragraph, because you know, if you jump from one week to the next, because I don't mark my book at all. So I just, I try to remember every week. So if ever going forward in the study, I forget a paragraph, please feel free to raise your hand and let me know that I'm on the wrong one. So I think, I know I am on the top of page 20, the paragraph beginning, you may already have asked yourself. So, last week we got into, there is a solution, chapter 2. And just a little caveat, I do have a little dog beside me. If there's an interruption, that'll be what it is. And there might be some noise in the background. So if I have to excuse myself for a couple of minutes because of that noise, that's really pretty okay. Because a very good friend of mine taught me this, that a noisy home is the sign of a recovered home. Do you remember what it was like when we weren't recovering? Everybody was tiptoeing around us. And there was pretty much silence everywhere because nobody knew what mood we were going to be in. So I love that fact. So if there is a little bit of noise in the background, that's a really good thing these days. That's how I look at it anyway. So, top of page 20, we're in There Is a Solution. If you've listened to the recording last week, we're talking about the fact that the title of the chapter is also important. The two little words in between, the solution. There is a solution. There is no if, there is no but, there is no maybe. In this chapter, they're going to tell us what this solution is. And those little words throughout the book are really important. It's like the word if. It's an exceptionally important word in the book because if is so conditional. I say to my sponsees all the time, if you do the work, it works. If you don't, it won't. It's that simple. It really and truly is that simple. And in the pieces that we're going to read today, it makes that clear as to how simple this all is. Let's trying to think if there's anything from the first couple of pages that we need. On page 17, that really important part of the book, we've reflected on the common peril and the common solution. I call page 17 the commons. The common peril being the allergy, the thing that we all have in common, and the other common being the solution, which is the book. That's the cement that binds us. Page 17, don't forget that page in the book. It sets out so many things, that we join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is a program of action. You know, many meetings do not make it. If you're sitting in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting and not taking any action, the meetings are an essential part of your program. Of course they are, but it's only one part. As is set out on the front cover page with the circle and triangle, you've got the unity, which is the meetings. The bottom of that triangle is recovery, which is the 12 steps. You've got service as well. So it has to be all three sides of that triangle. All three legacies together make us complete. Okay, so the paragraph we're going to start. And this, we're in the heart of step 1. We're still in step 1. Just because we're in chapter 2 doesn't mean that we've moved to step 2. We're in the heart of step 1, which continues right the way through to page 45. And I'll point out those little markers as we go along. We've covered already the physical allergy in the doctor's opinion. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be moving into the mental obsession. The mental obsession begins on page 23 and ends on page 43. And then we deal with the second half of the first step on page 44 and 45. And then from 45, we move into step 2. But I'll remind you of all of that as we go through. Don't be bamboozled and trying to remember all of that stuff. We grow where we're planted. So today where we're growing is within step 1. And you may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us become so very ill from drinking and using. And if you're not asking yourself that question, ask yourself that question now. Because what's the point of being in a meeting in Cocaine Anonymous and not starting to ask yourself these questions? Why is it that I am becoming so very ill from doing what I'm doing? Doubtless, you're curious to discover how and why in the face of expert opinion to the contrary. Expert opinion being those that have set out on page 18, which we talked about last week. That little paragraph, the people that can't help us. There's no psychiatrist, there's no doctor, there's no family member, there's no addiction counsellor, there's no rehab facility. Those professional bodies can give us a good grounding to start, but they in and of themselves is not enough to enable us to recover. And it goes on to say that. So in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered. Past tense, circle that word. It's mentioned 17 times in the 164 pages. What have we recovered from? This paragraph is really important because this is the place in the book where they tell us what we have recovered from, and that being a hopeless condition of mind and body. That recovered word is first mentioned on the front cover page. That they are going to share the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Okay, so it's mentioned 17 times in total in the 164 pages. Now, just for the recovered police, because there will be people in the rooms and they're here in Belfast too, these people that come in and tell me, but Mags, you should never be saying that word recovered because you're not recovered. Well, my book tells me 17 times that I am, and I can tell you today, as I sit here in front of you, I have recovered from a hopeless state of mind 100%. But for the purposes of the recovered police, I also want to point out the fact that in the book it tells us that yes, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I never forget that. And that's set out in more about alcoholism. And yeah, I'm never cured from alcoholism. What I have is a daily reprieve. And that's set out in our step 10. But as you know me by now, we grow where we're planted. So I'm not going to jump to those pages and more about alcoholism yet. I'm not going to jump into step 10 just yet because we're not there. We're in step 1. We need to understand our powerlessness physically, mentally, and why our lives are unmanageable. So recovered police, stand down, no issue. It tells me in my book what I've recovered from. And I love that we can have these discussions and debates, you know. I don't get involved in the controversy. If you believe that, that's 100% up to you, that you are recovering from the rest of your life. That's totally fine. And there are other chapters where they talk about the alcoholic addict convalescing. They do talk about them recovering, but that's whilst we go through the steps before we have the spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. Of course, I was in a period of recovering until I wasn't. When I had the spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, that hopeless, beyond medical aid state of mind and body was taken. And I have the tools in my spiritual toolkit to enable that not to return. If I do the work, it works. If I don't, it won't. Okay, so if you're an alcoholic who wants to get over it, ask yourself that question. Are you sitting in this room thinking that I am just going to be here for the fun and the laughter and the fellowship? Or do you want to get over it? Because if you do, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? question. The majority of times in the book where there's a question, there's only a couple of points in the book, and I'll point those out to you when we get to them. Every time there's a question in the book, they pose the question, they give us the answer. Okay, so here, what do I have to do? Anybody sitting in this room or listening to this recording? Well, get this. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Like, how amazing is that? The solution to your problem that you may not even think that you have just yet, because you haven't asked yourself the question, why am I so very ill doing all of this? Why am I mentally disturbed? Why am I physically wrecked? The book will answer such questions specifically. Like it says in the foreword to the first edition, I need go no further for any authentication of what I suffer from and how I overcome it, because it's in these 164 pages. Here's what they're going to do. We shall tell you what we've done. It's all in here. They're just going to tell us what they've done. They've put it down for us because they're so convinced by this solution that they have. They've written it down for us. So why wouldn't we pay any attention for it? And here's the other thing. This is what makes it even easier. There's somebody that actually takes you through it. So you don't even have to work this out by yourself. If you have a sponsor, they will take you through the 164 pages to enable and to show you exactly how they recovered. And how are they going to do that? Well, the first 100 that wrote the book, well, 73 of them really, but we like to round the number up because it's easier. What they're going to do is they're going to tell us what they've done, but before telling us what they've done, they're going to go into a detailed discussion. Okay, so they're going to show us what they've done, but before they do that, they're going to go into a detailed discussion. But before they go into the detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. So these next two paragraphs are a summary of some points. And ask yourself these questions as I read this. How many times has this happened to you? Is this you? How many times people have said to you, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer or wine? Lay off the hard stuff, whatever you're using. His will must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I think he'd stop for her. I think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that he ever drank again, it would kill him. But here he is, all lit up again. How many times have your family and friends said those things to you? Pleading with you, begging with you. Yet we know there are no family members that can stop us from this. None. There's not one medical person that can stop this. None. But here's the thing. The next summary of points. These are common observations on drinkers, addicts, which we hear all the time. We do. We hear it all the time. But here's the thing. The back of these statements in that previous paragraph is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Ignorance being lack of knowledge. The people that are saying these things have a lack of knowledge. They don't know what it is to be an alcoholic. They don't know what it is to be an addict. They have a lack of knowledge because they're not one of us. They don't understand. And that's why the previous page on page 18, when it talks about the ex-problem drinker armed with the facts about themselves, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. I could sit with anybody on this screen and connect with you within a matter of a few hours and have a conversation about where we're at, whether you have the common peril, whether you have that allergy, whether there is the mental obsession. In a matter of minutes, we would be able to get into a conversation. I would know more about your life in 30 minutes than a doctor would in helping you over 10 years. And that is how this works. We make that connection based on the common peril that we have physically, mentally. So it's not these people's fault that they have a lack of knowledge. They don't need to understand it because they don't have the addiction. We see these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Of course, they're very different from ours. They don't suffer from what we suffer from. They don't have the progressive illness. They don't have an unwired brain when it comes to these substances that we use. And when I say an unwired brain, what I mean by that is this program has enabled my brain to be rewired. It has not just stopped my drinking and using. It's rewired my brain. It's changed my thinking. And I'm highlighting that now because we're going to be moving into the mental obsession. This situation that I'm in no longer becomes about my using because I understand the common peril, but it comes about my thinking. And it explains that to us in this chapter. So there's the two little summary points, those paragraphs. And now, from this paragraph, beginning moderate drinkers, I would mark that number 1. We're going into this detailed discussion. And the detailed discussion begins at the bottom of page 20 and doesn't end until page 60. It doesn't end until we get to the third pertinent idea. This might not mean anything to anybody in the room. It doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't need to mean anything to you. I'm just pointing out a simple fact that this detailed discussion ends at the third pertinent idea. God could and would if he were sought. So what we're going to do together over the next number of weeks and months is get into that detailed discussion where we cover step 1 right the way through to step 2 before we move into step 3. Because at step 3, we get into this point where it says on page 60, after the third pertinent idea, being convinced, we were now at step 3. We're being convinced of what? Being convinced of the detailed discussion from page 20 to 60. Being convinced means being moved by the evidence. So having been moved by the evidence that we've read from page 20 to page 60, we're now ready to move into step 3 because we need to understand step 1 and 2 before we get to 3. It makes making the decision easier. We understand why we're going to be making the decision. But again, we'll cover that off as we get to each of those points, and I will always remind as I go through with my sponsees, this is how I do this stuff, you know. I don't know any other way. So number 1, moderate drinkers. We're asking ourselves, is this me? Is this me? Is this me? There's a lot of meetings I go to here in Belfast that are filled with moderate drinkers. Is this you? That moderate drinker has little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. With the substance that you're using, can you take it or leave it alone? You might be a moderate user. I don't know. Is it? Can you take it or leave it alone? Or, number 2, then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. Notice that I'll always emphasize and, because it is physical and mental. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may need medical attention. Medical attention will work for a heavy drinker. If a solution, doesn't have to be all of these solutions, and certainly we've tried many more than these solutions. Can you imagine? Oh my God, it actually makes me, I'm laughing about this now. Falling in love. Oh my God. The number of times I thought I'd fallen in love with somebody and it couldn't stop this progressive illness that I had. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just fall in love with somebody and this illness could be removed? Whatever. The number of times that I would have chosen a different environment, chosen a different partner, chosen a different job, because I thought all of that was the problem. when in actual fact it was not any of those necessarily, because I was choosing not to look at the drink problem. I was choosing not to look at the using problem. I couldn't admit. That's the whole point of step one. I couldn't let the idea in that I was powerless over any of those things. So just make it everything else in my life that's the problem. Got to ask yourself the question, is that you? Is that you? Because if it is you, that's a really good thing. If it is you, you're sitting in the right place. If it is you, there is a solution. If it is you, get a book and get a sponsor. Happy days. Join the party. It's just a different type of party from the one you're doing now. But the party that you're in right now is miserable. Miserable. It ain't no fun sitting in the party you're in. I know through bitter experience. Yet here we are on a Saturday morning, 8:25, somewhere in the UK, somewhere in the world. I don't know where you all are, but hey, what a life. What a life. And if there's anybody sitting, listening to this thinking, yeah, what a life, sitting here, 8:25 in the morning, this is the last place I want to be. Fair enough. Fair enough. But you can stay. You can stay and take some action, because this will be a way of living that will change your life entirely. It's that simple. And here's the good news. If you're number 3, 100%, this is a really good thing. My sponsees think I'm crazy when I say to them, oh, it sounds to me as if you're hopeless. And then they start to cry and all of that. And it's great, Yeah, but that's great that you're hopeless. That's a really good thing. Why? Because it's a really good place to start from. The more hopeless, the better. The more hopeless, how can I put this? The more hopeless, the more chance there is of something else getting in. When we admit we're powerless, something else comes in. Anyway, if this is you, but what about the real alcoholic? I always remember this, number 3, the real alcoholic. Page 21, don't forget it, because I'll always be referring back to it. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. None of that is relevant. Whether you've been moderate, whether you've been a heavy drinker, or whether you've been this type from the outset, doesn't matter. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control. This word is going to be mentioned again and again and again and again for the rest of this chapter. Control. Maybe circle it to jump out to you what this is all about. He has lost all control of his liquor consumption and using once he starts. So once you start and you cannot stop, all bets are off. So I know that I am a page 21 real alcoholic. I have lost all control. And in a few pages' time, they emphasize that even further. I love this story that we're going to go into, the Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde story was written originally by Robert Louis Stevenson, who is, or was, one of us. He was an alcoholic, so he knows what the Jekyll and Hyde character is really about. But what the first 100 do here is change it to become how we react in particular circumstances. So I'm going to read this really, really quickly. But as I'm reading it through, again, we're asking ourselves, is this me? Is this me? Is this me? So here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. With your using right now, think about this control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world. Yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He is a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in this respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills and aptitudes and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down in his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house, to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to the doctor, who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. Is this you? Was this you back in the day? I love to read that because it brings me right back to how it used to be. The madness, the insanity. That Jekyll and Hyde story shows the progression of the illness. It shows it physically. It shows it mentally. It shows how it consumes. It shows how it affects everybody, family, employment. Even though I was a really good individual, a really professional person, I showed up. Always showed up. But then as the illness progressed, I started to show up less, or I wasn't in full form, or I was missing really important events. And as the alcohol situation wasn't working, I started to use some other substances to be able to drink more. And then the cycle got worse and worse and worse and worse. Remember, this is a progressive illness. It tells us later on it gets worse, never better after every single relapse. My life story is I never, ever, ever relapsed because I could never, ever, ever stop. That's the extent to which this illness can take us. But here's the thing. This next paragraph is really important because you may not associate with any of the 17 behaviours that are included within that Jekyll and Hyde story. There's 17 behaviours in total. If you want me to go through them, then please drop me a message. I can number them all for you, but I didn't think anybody would want to know that now. But I can list those, Stephanie, and send them through to you in the chat so that people can see them. But ultimately, the point I'm trying to make here is there's 17 behaviours in there of a particular individual. Those behaviours may not be you. So I never lost my driving licence. Right? You might have lost your driving licence. But if we compare against each other, it kind of makes us exempt from admitting, if you like. What we've got to do is to identify. And I found it very, very, very difficult in the rooms to identify because there was nobody in the room that drank like me. There was nobody in the room that used like me. But what I then had to do was to set aside every single thing I thought I knew to have this new experience with God. That's why that set aside prayer is so important. There's no person on this planet that is going to have had exactly the same experience as you. All our lives and circumstances are different. But we have the common peril. And we can join in the common solution. There's nobody that has my circumstances in my life. We're all unique and exceptional. What brings us into the rooms is unique and exceptional. Everybody's journey to get to this point is different, but do not let that be the barrier to you thinking that you're not one of us. It's so incredibly important. Because the thing about it is, this story, this Jekyll and Hyde character, who you probably are, if you can get honest with yourself and admit that some of these behaviours are you or similar to what you've experienced. So this Jekyll and Hyde story is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, the real alcoholic defined on page 21, as our behaviour patterns vary. But this description should identify him roughly. This Jekyll and Hyde story is not a one story catches all. It's one example in the detailed discussion to bring to your mind, is this me? And that's why it's so incredibly important to work this program with a sponsor, to go through this detailed discussion, to understand step one. Because there's so many examples. They never stop giving us the examples and able for us to diagnose ourselves. It's that simple. And here's the thing. Why does he behave like this? Why does Stephanie behave the way that she behaves and Lou behaves the way that he behaves? Why does Lindsay behave? Why does anybody behave the way they behave when they're under the influence of whatever it is they're using? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink, one use means another debacle with all its intended suffering and humiliation, why is it that he uses? Why is it that we take that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower? Circle that word, willpower, that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters. We are paying attention to the word control. We're paying attention to the word willpower. We're paying attention to the word power with a lowercase p, which means strength. When it's capitalized with an uppercase P, it means God. I'm pointing that out for a reason, and it will make more sense as we go through. So, what about our willpower when it comes to things like this? I had great willpower. I had great determination, but I couldn't stop this problem. I couldn't stop it. Every other problem under the sun that I had in my life, I had a way of overcoming it. I had a way of getting to the root of it. I had the ability to call in all my resources, but when it came to this, I did not. But the thing about it is, these questions are irrelevant for us that suffer from the progressive illness. Those questions are for the people that are not us. They're the people with the ignorance, the lack of knowledge. It's like my brother and sister saying to me, why can't you just stop? Really? I'm trying so hard to stop, but I can't. But then they started not to believe me. They thought I was being dishonest. They thought that I was lying to them. They thought that I was being deceptive. But I couldn't explain to them that I so desperately wanted to stop but couldn't. Because here's the thing. The reality of it is you're sitting in this room wondering why you cannot stop and what I'm going to do about it, blah, blah, blah. The reality of it is perhaps there will never be a full answer to any of these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. I don't get involved in any of the controversy. Is it inherited? Is it in my genes? Am I born with it? Am I not born with it? Doesn't matter. We can never fully answer those questions. I don't get involved in the windy-windy arguments. Here's the thing, though, that we must pay attention to. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, doesn't matter when that point is, but once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. Little can be done for me. We cannot answer the riddle. I can't understand why it took X amount of alcohol and X amount of drugs to get me to the point of hopeless state of mind and body. Yet it might only take somebody else in this room a small amount of time or a small amount of using to become an addict, full-blown, to lose all control. Yet, as we go through the book, it enables us to pinpoint when things started to change. So if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I don't actually know whether I am one of you or not, that's okay, because your sponsor's going to help you pinpoint that. I won't ever be able to answer the riddle for all of my sponsees as to why they were impacted with the common peril, when it happened, when it didn't happen, blah, blah. It's not for me to work that out. That's not what we're here for. That riddle is never going to be answered. You have to be moved by the evidence yourself by working this program to identify whether you're one of us or not. Because they go on to explain that although we react differently to normal people, I have a really abnormal reaction to a really normal substance, that being alcohol. But we know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men when we're not using. We react much like normal people. Yet at the same time, we are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, any drug, whatever into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mentally sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. Like, impossible. No control. No power. Impossible for you to stop by yourself. So if you're sitting in the rooms, just going to meetings, thinking that will fix you, it will not. It is impossible. And here's the good news though. The experience of any one of us who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, who have had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, will abundantly confirm this for you. Through bitter experience, my own bitter experience, I can abundantly confirm for you my physical allergy, the mental obsession, and how I overcame it. And if you think about this, and I do this exercise with my sponsees at this point in the book anyway, with every single, pinpoint those times. If you are honest with yourself through your own bitter experience, you for yourself will be able to abundantly confirm that physically and mentally something's going on inside you that makes you different from other people. So when I first went through the steps, I did this exercise. My sponsor made me do it. Paper and pen, go through your life as far back as you can remember when you started using and drinking. And look at the behaviors. Look at the things that you lost. Look at where you were able to drink moderately, or were you ever able to? Look at where you became a heavy drinker, or were you ever a heavy drinker? You know, were you alcoholic right from the outset? I was then able, with this exercise, when I was able to be willing, when I was honest with myself, and when I kept a really open mind. I remember I was at X age when I took my first drink. I started to see then by the time I was, 4 years later, something started to shift. 2 years later, something started to shift, and so on. I was able to pinpoint these moments where my behaviors and the consequences started to change, but not just the behaviors and the consequences. I was actually able to see the progression of the illness, how it was starting to consume me physically, how I couldn't lift the first drink, because the problem is the first drink. The problem is the first pickup, and that's what we're going into. From page 23 to 43, we're talking about the mental obsession. We stop taking, we stop consuming, then we have the physical or the mental obsession. That's where we have no mental defense against the first use. That's the problem. I was able to mark when I was X age, 23, 25, 28, 32, 35, 40, 42, 44, 45, whatever the age may be beyond that, right? I was able to pinpoint all of that. And it took me to actually whatever age to get it. And in that exercise, I was able to see and didn't see it before. And I know this sounds absolutely and utterly ridiculous, but I was then able to identify that for nearly 30 years, I wasn't able to get control. It went on for 30 years. And when I started to do this program, it stopped. When I did the work, it worked. But I was oblivious to the insidiousness of this progressive illness up to that point. The substances, the alcohol, it was what beat me into a state of reasonableness. There was no doctor, there was no family member, there was no friend that was going to talk me into stopping. It was futile. Futile being pointless. Completely and utterly pointless. Is that you? So here, today, we start into the mental obsession, 23. Don't know whether, yeah, okay. So these observations, all of these things that I'm pointing out, all of these things that we're talking about, these observations would be academic. They'd be great to know. Happy days. You've taught me something here, Mags. But they're academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. But our problem is that we keep doing that. We keep picking up. We keep on using, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. You know, in the rooms here, they told me don't ever pick up the first drink. I never knew why I didn't pick up the first drink. I didn't know why that was the problem. I only ever went out for 2 drinks. And drugs never were in my life until they were. Because when the drinks stopped working, I then hit those too. But the thing for me is, in the rooms, they didn't help me as a newcomer understand. Because bless them, they were giving me what they knew. They hadn't been through the program like my sponsor has brought me through now. Those people in those rooms saw something that I needed and they loved me at my worst, but they didn't give me this solution. And I am so incredibly grateful to those men and women that took me by the hand and ultimately got me to the right person to help me. I place no judgment on opinion on those people. They told me what they knew. Keep coming back. Don't pick up the first drink. They never explained to me why. And that's okay. That's okay. Because now I've got what I've got, I know that I'm responsible for passing it on in the way that it has been given to me. So all of this would be academic if I was just able to not pick up for the first time. If I was just able to sit here and just, well, whatever, I don't need it. Don't fancy it. Don't really see the point. I'm not capable of that by myself. The reality of it is, it's important for us to understand that the main problem, our main problem, is that this addiction, this illness, centers in our mind. Mental obsession. This is all about the inside. This is all about my thinking at this point, rather than in my body. We know we have the allergy, but we're now moving on to a different sphere altogether. Here's the thing, and ask yourself this. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 million trillion alibis. Sometimes these excuses had a certain plausibility. Oh yeah, I was stressed at work, so I kind of thought we'd go out for a bit and get relaxed and whatever. It was no big deal. Certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc that we cause after these bouts. Havoc. Get with this program. Havoc means the reality that you have caused. Havoc, just people might just think, oh, it's just a bit of chaos that it caused. No, it's your reality. Because every time you go out, you cause havoc. Every time you're using, you're causing havoc. Might not be affecting other people around you, but it's certainly affecting you. They sound, I love this, because isn't this so true? They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. How many times have we gone back out again with that hammer, hit ourselves over the head? Oh, feel really, really bad. Just get a bigger hammer. Oh, feel really, really bad. Get an even bigger hammer. Oh, I feel really, really bad. Oh, do you know what? What's the point? Just get a load of concrete and pour it on me. There's no point. You know, just thinking that the using is going to make us feel better. The vicious cycle. It's craziness. It's absolute and utter insanity. And it goes on to give us the description of that later on. If you draw this fallacious reasoning, so if you draw this mistaken belief, we are filled with illusion and delusion. You are very much in a mistaken belief. But if you draw the attention to us, We laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. If anybody in my life pointed out my using, pointed out anything to do with my drinking, my behavior or whatever, especially the amount that I was taking or where I was going to get it, etc., you were cut out of my life. I was no longer in your company. Why would I want to be around you? You're not drinking and using like I am. You're no use to me. See you later. Off I popped. You know, those fair weather friends that Bill W. talks about. And ultimately, like Bill, I ended up like the lone wolf. Is that you? Are you hanging about with a load of fair weather friends? Are you beating yourself over the head with a hammer thinking this is going to get better? Because it ain't. And is this you? I love this paragraph. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. Once in a while. That didn't really even happen once in a while for me, to be honest. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. I always remember my sister, my niece and nephew. I'd gone out, I was telling lies about my using. They came home. My sister very kindly allowed me to stay at her home. And I'd gone out. I came back to her house and fell asleep whilst they were out. Those two beautiful children and my amazing sister came in to find me in God knows what shape. And my sister broke her heart and screamed at me in frustration. Why? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You have to tell us the answer. You have to know why you're doing this. And you know what? My response? I shrugged my shoulders. I couldn't explain why. I thought I was going insane. And she screamed, and she screamed, and quite rightly so. And she pointed to her children. And they pleaded. Those two children begged. And I didn't know. And they left the room. I will never forget that vision until the day I die. But you know what? With the grace of God, I'm not going to die today because of my addiction. I'm not going to die today knowing that I caused more havoc in their lives. And ultimately, that was not the end for me. I continued for another 18 months because I had no control, because I had no power. You got to ask yourself, is that you? Because the reality of it is, some drinkers have excuses with which they're satisfied part of the time. But here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. You know I point out this word. You may have excuses that you're satisfied with part of the time. But in your heart, set aside every single thing you think you know to have a new experience with God and go into your heart. Because really, when you do that, you will know that you really do not know why you do it. Once this malady, once this condition of the heart, once this spiritual malady has a real hold on you, you're completely baffled. You're completely cut off from the light. There's not one bit of light getting in. Baffled means to be cut off from the light. You may be sitting in this room completely and utterly baffled as to what is happening in your life right now. We have a solution. This is a solution. You may be this person that there is the obsession Obsession meaning that you have this absolutely and utterly unreasonable preoccupation, a total and utter unreasonable idea that you can pick up for one. You can have one more hit. It's an obsession. It centers in your mind. You've got no mental defense against that first pickup. You have the obsession that somehow, someday, you will beat the game. But here's the truth. In your heart, you suspect you're down for the count already. Is that you? Because if it is you, we've got a solution. Show up, get a sponsor, get a book, keep on turning the pages, let the book do the work. Your sponsor will take you by the hand, place your hand into the hand of the God of your own understanding. And we'll get to that point when we get to that point. But I'm going to leave it at there for now.